an NFL running back, a jazz pianist, and a jar of jam. An NFL running back, a jazz pianist, and a jar of jam. What do these have to do with the future of publishing? Well, I'm about to tell you, and in case I forget, I've written them, made a few notes to myself right here. We all know that we live in an age of accelerating change. Consider this. To reach an audience of 50 million users, it took TV 38 years. It took radio 13 years. It took the internet 4 years, the iPod 3 years. It took Facebook just 2 years. Media habits are changing quickly. The rate of adoption of technology continues to increase exponentially. Why now? It's simple. The widespread accessibility of broadband. There are now more than 75 million high-speed residential lines, up from less than 15 million in 2002. In just the last decade, technology has become a vital presence in our everyday lives. Gadgets, websites, networks that didn't even exist 10 years ago are now indispensable to many of us. How many of you are tweeting? How many of you are tweeting about anything that I'm talking about? Well, talk about fast adoption rates. 55 million users per month are now on Twitter. Here's a question to start the digital conversation in the Twitter sphere. What tech device can you not live without today that didn't even exist 10 years ago? In our industry, it's the same pace of change. Changing media habits are affecting the way we promote, the way we sell, and the way we buy books. In the last 10 years, what's happened? One television personality helped put 34 books on the bestseller list. Internet superpowers came out of nowhere to drive major shifts in the publishing world. And now there's a new reading device, it seems, every week. I was at CES this year, and you could feel the excitement. In just a few years from now, the ebooks of today, which are basically a carbon copy of the print version, they will be old news. And in their place will be enhanced media versions that make stories come alive. Innovation will not start and end with devices. Innovation will transform content. It will redefine what a book even is. And the story and the future couldn't be more exciting. We live in a world of acceleration, and we require innovation. I want to touch on 3 major technology trends that are affecting our industry. First is the growth of online retail. Of all retail sales in 2008, 5% were online sales. And in 2009, 6%. By 2013, experts are predicting it will be 8%, and it's going to keep going up. And we've all seen the explosion in ebook sales. The shifting retail landscape from bricks and mortar to online is already changing the way books are bought and sold, and it's already having an impact on publisher behavior. Write this one down. There is no fundamental right to survive. As a bookseller or as a publisher, whether you're big today, whether you've existed for many years, it does not give you an automatic ticket to a bright future. In just the last decade, as customers migrated online, we've seen several big chains and over 500 independent bookstores closed. So the online transition is happening, but it doesn't mean we should be afraid of it. We need to understand it. We need to embrace it. David Carr wrote in the New York Times, 5 years ago, almost no one paid for music online. But now 9 billion or so songs later, we know that people are willing to pay if the price is right and the convenience is there. A good lesson for publishing. Second, the speed of innovation is rapidly transforming the media industry, and it will certainly affect how we run our businesses. The ebooks of today will be gone tomorrow. New game-changing devices will emerge that will support cross-media reading experiences. And publishers are going to continue to grapple with what seems like chaos. Questions around digital rights, digital piracy, digital formats, the list goes on and on. Publishers must stay focused on creating and marketing innovative content. Lastly, generational shifts in the consumption of media are changing and will continue to change how we reach and retain readers. Most of us think about print or digital separately. We don't think of them as the same. We think either print or digital. When I was growing up, if you were playing a game, you either played Monopoly or you played a digital game. Maybe, how many of you remember Pong? You know, that was really advanced, right? They were very separate, but today's generation is blurring them together. How many of you have ever heard of Webkinz? Anyone? My daughter's 12 now, but when she was 9, the first Webkinz came into our house. And for those of you who have young children, beware, the first is only the entrance of an entire zoo that will soon take over your entire house. Well, these Webkinz came in, and they have a little tag, and you go to webkinz.com, and you enter the code, unique code that comes with each one of these animals, and you end up with an online pet. But here's what really amazed me. My daughter did not see a distinction between the physical product in her hand and the digital product on the screen. They were blurred. To her, they were one and the same. I think that has huge ramifications for the future of publishing because the next generation is blurring the lines between print and digital. They're not looking at them separately. So how many of you have kids that know Webkinz? Anyone? I don't want to hit anyone with coffee. Heads up. All right. The next generation of kids is different. A study released last fall showed that young people spend 8 to 18 hours. Kids 8 to 18 spend 7.5 hours per day in front of a device, whether that be a DS, a television, a computer, a laptop, or a mobile phone. And our industry needs to be thinking how to engage this new generation. What about you and your generation? What's your reading preference, print or electronic? Are you seeing those lines blurred? So here we are. We're in a period of change, uncertainty, economic ups, and it seems lately mostly downs. The change is happening faster and faster every month. Here's just a sample of some of the headlines that are plaguing our industry in the last year. Book reviews disappearing. Staff cuts, routine. Industry fighting for survival and change at the same time. Price wars are erupting. Questions are being asked, how will literature even survive? And here's my personal favorite headline. Independent bookstores ask for help in a letter to none other than Santa Claus. Now there is our answer. Should have thought of that one earlier. But we've been here before, right? After all, the demise of publishing has been predicted at least since the last TOC, if not since the days of Gutenberg. So what can we do? Well, a man was in a hot air balloon, and he was completely lost, and he gets to the edge of a field, and as he's there at the edge of the field, he sees someone, and he calls down. He says, excuse me, can you tell me where I am? And the man shouted back. He says, sure, you're in a hot air balloon at the edge of a field. And the man says, you must be in IT. And he says, how'd you know? And he says, because you gave me useless information, and I still don't know the answer to my question. And the man says, you must be in management. And he says, how do you know? He says, because you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going, and somehow it's my fault. So with apologies that I am in management, I do have 3 suggestions for the industry on how to handle this period of change. The first is simplify, connect, and conquer. Simplifying your business means this. Know what your unique strategic value is and focus on it relentlessly. You must differentiate your mission. Know your strategy and be so good at one thing that you're untouchable. The days of doing everything are over. Chris Johnson was playing a few years ago at East Carolina. And for those of you who don't know football, East Carolina is not exactly the hotbed of recruiting for the NFL. So Chris knew that he had to do something new, something to differentiate himself, and he knew he was fast. And here's what he did. He hired a coach. And a nice note to yourself is we could all use a little coaching, right? So here he is. He hires a coach. He's focusing on his speed. And the coach comes along and says, you know, Chris, we're going to work on one thing for your speed. We're going to reduce the number of strides that you take. And so they worked and worked on it. And in 40 yards, they worked to get that all the way down to 18 strides in 40 yards. And here's what Chris did. He became, in the NFL trials that year, the fastest 40 yards in NFL electronically timed history, 4.24 seconds. What is your company's unique differentiator that you can work on, like Chris did with his strides, to make yourself unique and differentiate you from the competition? Professor Barry Schwartz, in his book, The Paradox of Choice, talks about the impact of too many choices on consumer behavior. Did you know this? In a typical grocery store, you'll find 285 variety of cookies, 75 iced teas, 175 salad dressings, 40 toothpaste, 230 soups, and 275 cereals. His study showed that we all love choices, but too many choices can paralyze us. Here was the study. On day one, they took 24 jars of jam and they put it out in the grocery store on display. And it was exciting. I mean, 24 different, aren't you excited? 24 different jams. I mean, people were comparing notes. Crowds were gathering. This was an exciting time. I mean, Jam Spectator might have been there awarding, 92.4 for a certain jam. I mean, it was exciting. Crowds were gathering. And then on day two, they did something else. They reduced the number and they had only 6 jams. 6 jams out on the floor. Not as many crowds. Press didn't show up, wasn't very exciting. But here's what happened. This is what was amazing. 10 times more jams sold on day 2 than day 1. 10 times. You see, the excitement did not translate into results. Too many choices can paralyze somebody from making a decision. And Professor Schwartz went on to show that even with 401ks, the more options, the more mutual funds that you offer, for every 10 new mutual funds offered, the participation in 401ks dropped by 2%. So, what is true for consumer behavior and what can paralyze a customer is the same for an industry in the midst of rapid change. What do we focus on? The dozens of new devices being released, the new websites, the explosion of new titles, the new ways content's being developed and consumed. What about all the new business models? Too many choices can paralyze a consumer, it can paralyze a publishing company, and it could paralyze the industry. So what do we do about it? Limit the variables. Decide what you want to do and do it relentlessly better than anyone else. Now, jams and a running back may seem very far from the world that you live in, but there's a great example of this principle right here in our industry. In August 2005, Jonathan Karp established 12, and the objective was publish no more than 1 book per month. And this would let them focus their resources into each title. And in the first year of the 12 books published, 8 hit the bestseller lists. Now, less books is clearly not the answer for every publishing company, but it was how they chose to differentiate themselves. Another avenue to simplification, get back to the basics. And this is something that we've been focusing on in Ingram for the last year. We looked at our entire business and we refocused on a core mission, helping content reach its destination. We're not creating content, we're not a destination site, but we help do everything in between so publishers can focus on what they do best. From our distribution system with 2.6 million in-stock titles, the fastest growing full-service distributor in the publishing industry, to our innovation and commitment in the print-on-demand with now more than 1.6 million titles available at Lightning Source. And finally, we've invested in digital solutions, from VitalSource as the most advanced electronic textbook platform to CoreSource, which is an e-content solution that offers content management, hosting, and distribution. Our mission helped us simplify our core business and get back to our own basics, investing in that supply chain physically and digitally so publishers can focus their investment to create and market the innovative content. Publishers need to move from defense to offense and focus on true cross-media publishing opportunities to create the next generation of ebooks. If experience has taught us anything, we know that as we know it today will be obsolete in 5 years. It will be replaced by something newer and something better. Excuse me. Next is connect. The digital age is all about being connected. It's critical to pay attention to the connections at every level of your business. No matter what kind of reader, no matter what kind of category, you must know your customers inside and out. Where do they hang out in the real or digital world? How do you reach them? What do they respond to? It is said, I don't know if this story is true, but it's said that Senator Bill Bradley was once at a dinner, and as he was there, the waiter came along and was putting a pat of butter on everybody's bread plate. And as it got to Senator Bradley, he said, "I'd like 2 pats of butter." And the waiter said, "No, 1 pat each. That's the limit." And, he thought he was kidding and said, "I'd like to have another pat of butter." And he says, "No, 1 pat." And Senator Bradley kind of got incensed. He says, "Don't you know who I am? I'm a senator from the great state of New Jersey. I'm a presidential candidate. I'm a former pro basketball player. I'm a former Rhodes Scholar. Don't you know who I am?" And the waiter looked at him and he said, "Don't you know who I am?" And Senator Bradley looked at him and said, "No." And he says, "I'm the one who controls the butter." Know who controls your destiny. Know your customer. Know who controls your butter. And focus on their needs relentlessly. And while it's important to nurture those connections closest to your business, also watch the people and the ideas that's changing at the periphery. Chip and Dan Heath, in their new book, Switch, cite a study at Columbia University. And they had students volunteer for a study, and the students were filling out a questionnaire, which was, of course, a ruse for the real study, as everyone knows, right? And the students, as they were sitting there alone, were filling out the survey, and 75% of them went and got help as smoke started entering the room. Well, then they did it in groups, and they found that with a group, what happened? It dropped to 38%. Only 38% of the people went to get help with a group. Why? We take our social cues from others and we diminish the change. If it isn't a big deal to someone else, we think it doesn't matter. And if that can happen with a serious matter like smoke pouring in the room, what happens to us? We could easily ignore that. And that's what this conference is all about, looking outside our direct line of sight into the changes happening on the edge. So how do you best connect with your customers, and how is that changing as you move forward? Finally, it's time to conquer. And in order to do so, we have to leave our comfort zones and test the boundaries. There's great examples of publishers who are breaking out of the traditional publishing model. For example, in the hands of Dominique Rocca at Sourcebooks, today's paperback anthology becomes tomorrow's interactive literary website. And other publishers are looking at new ways to serve up literature and content. Publishing is one of the most creative industries around. But as with any creative profession, forward momentum is often hindered by self-imposed limitations. If you've ever heard, "Well, that's how we've always done it," you know exactly the type of limitation I'm talking about. And we faced that at Ingram in the past as well. But guess what? The new players, they don't care how it's always been done. They don't know, and they don't care to know. The new players change things faster because they don't know what the limitations are supposed to be. Art Tatum, arguably the greatest jazz pianist that has ever lived. And he had some musical training, but largely he was self-taught. How did he learn to play? Well, when he was very young, blind in one eye, barely able to see in the other, he would put his fingers on the keys of a player piano and he would duplicate the song. What he didn't know was that the pieces that he was playing on his own were actually recorded by 2 pianists. One person, Art Tatum, did what was previously only possible for 2 people to do. Not knowing that what he was doing was supposedly impossible, Art Tatum went right ahead and showed the world his musical genius. What limitations do you put on yourself that shouldn't be there? What could be possible if you focused on what you do best? If you focused your company on a unique differentiator, what could be possible for you? Simplify, connect, and conquer. So when you go back to the office and you're watching football in your office, when you crank up the music, and when you have jelly sticking to your fingers and all over your computer's keyboard, just tell your boss you are applying what you learned at TOC, how a jar of jam, how an NFL running back, and how a jazz pianist provide lessons for transforming publishing. Thank you.